This is the Self-Taught or Not podcast with
Dylan Israel
and Eric Hanchett, where we teach you the do's and don'ts of software development from two software development professionals, one self-taught and one not. Hey everyone. So today on Self-Taught or Not, we're going to do something a little different. As the title of our podcast goes, I am the not version of Self-Taught or Not. I have a traditional education, a background, a computer science degree. Dylan is completely self-taught. He has a little bit of college. But we have a guest today. Laura, thank you for being on. You have your own podcast, the Suitcase Coder. You're doing a lot of cool things, and you actually are really interesting to talk to because you went through a coding bootcamp. Is that right?
Correct. I went through Thinkful's coding bootcamp just last year.
Awesome. Okay. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Laura, as you said, or Laura. I have a podcast out and I try to do podcasts and YouTube videos on Suitcase Coder. The idea behind that is kind of brings me to like why I got into development, which is my goal to travel the world. And I figured that one of the careers was to become a remote developer. So I actually got fired a couple years ago, decided to change careers, was looking into development, joined a coding bootcamp and graduated, and since have been freelancing as a developer. So that's a little bit roundabout of an about me.
So go ahead, Dylan.
Yeah, so what about the remote aspect really attracted you? Because a lot of people are looking for multiple different reasons to work remote. Is it the hours? Is it the lifestyle?
I think for me, it comes from the way I grew up, which is both of my parents are Guatemalan. So a lot of my family, I grew up with my cousins, grandparents, everybody living out of the country. So a lot of our life was, visiting Guatemala and then coming back here and then having that sense of like missing out on things. But then also knowing that there was more than just the life that I had here. So I think traveling just opened up my eyes, and then I did a study abroad. So traveling has been a big part of my life, and it's something that I always want to like prioritize in my life. And I knew that I wanted to do it the right way. I don't want to like go broke, travel the world, and just live that like hippie life that you sometimes see and like, doing it the wrong way. So I really want to do it financially, like in a financially stable kind of way, and traveling the world and doing it while I can still contribute and do something that I enjoy.
Yeah, I can completely agree. I mean, I've sort of fallen into a full-time remote role just by the nature of it, and just that flexibility of before the world was on fire, just getting up and going and working anywhere. I was in Salt Lake, I was in Kansas City, I was in
Right.
LA, and then it's a fantastic thing to do, and really, I couldn't recommend it more to anybody.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even about just like traveling and living this like luxurious life, but like it allows me to go visit family in Guatemala or go visit family here, friends whenever I want to, and not have to worry about like having to take days off of work, when you can work during the days and then, weekends or afternoons still spend quality time with other people around the globe. So
Is that sort of where the suitcase came from? I've been like sort of creeping on your website here, trying to figure out the suitcase portion to see if there's a story behind that.
yeah, so again, I think the idea behind Suitcase Coder was it started off a whim. When I started the bootcamp, I said I want to track my journey, but mainly for myself to see like how much I grow. But then also along the way, I realized that I was coming up with a lot of like struggle points that I realized a lot of other people also fall into. And something that I mentioned in one of my last podcasts is sometimes it's something so simple that once you learn it, you like never find tutorials for it because it is so simple. So I wanted to like help others in ways that in aspects in which I struggled with. But in the journey, I was thinking about like, okay, well, what's my end goal? And my end goal, like I said, has always been to travel, and have that freedom to travel. So I figured Suitcase Coder kind of perfectly entails working as a developer as well as traveling and picking up on a suitcase whenever I can.
I like that idea of the profession we're in as developers, because you can, as you guys are saying, you can pick up, you can get a remote job or a freelance job. You have a lot of freedom in that. It depends obviously on the job and what's available. Do you
Right.
find that being newer to the profession makes that kind of remote part more difficult? Would you rather be in an office with other developers?
I definitely find it more difficult in two senses. So, like, one thing that comes to mind is I knew from the beginning that it was going to be very hard to find something remote as my first job. And I was always kind of realistic about it and thinking long term. And then also for myself, I wanted to be in an office environment and learn and pick up as much as I possibly could, have being surrounded by other developers. And because you learn a lot, I feel like you learn a lot being there and seeing and shadowing and just experiencing it in person. um, so I do value like the 8 to 5 corporate or like in person kind of environment. But I think once you kind of reach a level to where you're not being pushed anymore, or you know when it's time to go. um, so I think that there's value in both, and I wasn't ever expecting to get a remote job from the get-go. um, so yeah, I value both. I think it's just doing it right. Like I said, you want to be experienced, you want to be able to work from wherever and be comfortable working from wherever you are, and not having to depend on somebody being like right by your side helping you out.
Yeah, that's definitely the dream for a lot of developers, is just having, getting to that point, being able to work from home. I know Dylan really enjoys working from home.
Hmm.
He's been, I've started actually, I was only working from home for a day or two a week. And now, since the whole change with the COVID, I'm now working from home every day.
Right.
And I like the freedom, although, my house is really crazy. I have a couple of kids that just uh, like to bother me right in the middle of the workday. So I guess there's pluses and minuses there.
Oh yeah, I get that. I don't have kids, but I'm moved back in with my parents, and they're like my kids who bother me all day long.
Do your this might be something that's happened to me. I'm just curious what happened to you. When I was like studying code and like
Hmm.
working on the computer, my parents just didn't get it. They just thought I was in there like doing Netflix. Is that something that you struggle with?
Oh yeah, every single day. And this is like even after I've gone through the boot camp, after like, I'm freelancing, so I do have actual work to do. And I'll just be working and all of a sudden I'll be on a call and you hear Laura from across the house. Laura, I need your help. And I'm just like, so no, I definitely like it's hard for them to understand what I do because I'm not going into an office every day.
Yeah,
Um,
it's somewhat strange where like even like when my ex-girlfriend used to live together, she'd just come in here and be like, "Hey, can you do the dishes?" It's like, "No, like I'm literally working." Like like I have to sit here and do my job to keep it. I can't go and do the dishes at 10:30 a.m.
yep. Yep, that's definitely something that I'm struggling with and still learning about. And I think for them is I actually moved in with them to save money to be able to like afford the boot camp. And the idea, I think in their minds and also in mine, was do the boot camp, get a job right afterward, and then move out and go work at that job. But I got lucky and I've been working remotely, but that also means that I don't have to move anywhere. And so I'm trying to save as much as I can, and I'm still here. And for them, it's hard to make that connection of like she has a job, she just doesn't have to go to it. So
I want to deep dive into that before. I want to kind of rewind it a little bit
sure.
and go back to when you were making that decision. You said you had some career changes, got laid off from a job, and then you were looking for what to do next. So what we kind of touched on a little bit, like why did you want to go into development? How did you make the choice to go to a coding boot camp? I think that's a lot of people struggle with this idea. me included, Dylan included. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of choices between going to a coding boot camp like you did versus, something that worked really well with Dylan, and we talked about before we started recording, is Free Code Camp, which is an amazing resource. I think we all agree, and they have so many things. But you can literally grind Free Code Camp, do every single lesson, and get to a somewhat okay level, maybe slightly lower than a junior level developer level. And then there's also some people that just end up going back to school. I don't know if you have an undergrad degree, or did you? How was your decision making, and how'd that all come about?
Sure. So I definitely think I do hear that question a lot. Like, do I do a boot camp? How is it for you? And they want to know, like, should I do it? Yes or no? And will I get a job? Yes or no? And those are very difficult questions to answer for each person, because I think every person's situation is so different, and it really depends on the individual. So in my case, I actually went to college. I graduated. I thought I wanted to be a vet my entire life. I got to college. I majored in biology, and I started failing all of my classes. Like, I mean, failing, and I'm totally okay with sharing that, obviously. It's just, it wasn't clicking. And because of my study abroads, I was already interested in German. So I ended up switching majors and graduating with a degree in German, the language, which is pretty useless when you don't want to teach it. But at that point, it was just like I had to get my degree in time. And so when I graduated with that degree, one of the few jobs that I could land was as a customer service representative for like the German team of a company. And that team was, because I was dealing with European customers, it was during the night shift. So I would go into work at midnight and leave at 10 in the morning. And I learned a lot, and it was a really awesome startup. But I obviously, like, that was not a life that I was wanting for myself or had imagined for myself. But luckily during this job, there was two of us working night shifts. So we ended up having to deal with a lot of the issues, including like accounting, marketing, logistics, because there was nobody else at that time in the office. And it was during that time that I kept like coming up with issues that I would face, like, for example, like the sales tax works differently in Europe than it does in the States. And so I would constantly be going over to the tech team being like, hey, just add this button here and it'll make our lives and our clients' lives so much easier. Or, hey, if you could just do this, like drop down, or do like, just like these, I would basically like find all these solutions, but I couldn't actually make them. I couldn't do them myself because I didn't have the skills. And so that's definitely where it kind of got in my head of like, okay, maybe if I learn the skills, that would be something that I would enjoy, because just because I'm already kind of dealing with it, and in a way. So anyway, so that kind of put it in my head. And then after getting fired, which again I talk about openly, it was kind of the perfect time to make the switch into, I could get another job as an assistant and not like it, or I can do 180 and actually learn a skill that will find me a job that I actually enjoy. And so that's kind of when I started looking into my different options, and I knew I didn't want to, so I laid it out for myself. I was like, okay, well, I have, like, financially, I don't want to go back to school for another 4-year degree. Like, that's just not going to work. I wanted a job that was going to allow me to travel, because that's always been the plan. And I wanted something that I could do in a reasonable amount of time. And so just laying out my options, I started looking into, development. And then once I was looking into development, I saw the option. I was like, okay, there's bootcamp, college, or self-taught. And I knew I didn't want to go back to college, just because I know I don't do the best in that environment. And then I know I wanted a little bit more discipline on than being self-taught, just because I did start off in Free Code Camp, and I recommend that to literally everybody who's interested in getting started, because it's such a great resource. But it comes to the point where I was spending more time trying to figure out what to learn next, or what I was supposed to be learning, rather than actually learning the things. And so at that point, I started digging into different boot camps, and until I finally decided to join Thinkful. And I'm really happy with the with the way that turned out.
Now, you mentioned your degree in German. I'm curious if that had any sort of impact on your learning process, because I think very much so when I think about people learning development, you have to sort of learn how to think differently. And I don't know if that's the same with learning a second language. I've never have, but I was wondering if you think that helped at all.
Oh, absolutely. And I said it like as soon as I started learning how to code, I was like, wow, this is just like learning German. It's just you have to learn the vocabulary, the syntax, and knowing how to like place it in the right order, essentially. You know, you have to learn all the little, like, just like you learned grammar and all the rules that go with that language, you have to learn all the rules for JavaScript and CSS and everything. So I think it definitely helped. And I think you're so right in knowing, first of all, how you learn, as well as like knowing how to learn for developing.
Yeah, I definitely think there's like you've covered two things that I've really liked so far. That one, understanding how you learn and being successful in that environment. College for me is likewise not necessarily a place I thrive in.
Mm-hmm.
And then two, about being open about your failures along the way. So I think so often people get this sort of Instagram version of life that's really unrealistic. Of like, oh hey, yeah, you know what? Look, I have six pack abs. Like, yeah, you starved yourself and worked out for a year,
Right.
um, or like, look how great my life is. But I like that you're openly talking about these unfortunate events, or maybe not even unfortunate, just life events.
Right. And I think you're right. And I like talking about them because without those like failures, I don't think I would be where I am right now. And each one of those failures definitely was a huge learning point. And I truly think that they led me to be where I am now. And I think it's good to share them because I think, like you're saying, it's good to have realistic expectations, and sharing that with other people might motivate them a little bit more to give it a try, at least to give something else a try. So I appreciate
Now,
that.
yeah, now when talking about the boot camp and sort of your mindset, you had mentioned that you were spending, so the return on your time essentially was you're spending a lot of time trying to figure out what to study and not even studying it. Now, when you went to Thinkful, uh, what was the curriculum like? Was it what you were looking for in the sense of like very organized, very like this is it, these are the things? How was that?
Yeah, so I did a lot of research when it came to looking for boot camps. It was money, curriculum, time, uh, the way the like the sorry the research, the resources that they provided. And when I got to Thankful, I really had no idea. I mean, I had started on Free Code Camp. I'd been reading like you need to start with HTML and then JavaScript, and then there was like Java, and I didn't know the difference between JavaScript and Java. So like I was pretty lost still, even after spending some time on Free Code Camp. And when I got to Thankful, their curriculum was so well laid out, and there was a structure to it. And from the way that I learn, which was the learning process, like I said, um, it's good for me to see the big picture before getting into the details. So like what I liked about Thankful is knowing, like, having goals and seeing like, okay, to reach this part of the curriculum, you have to complete this, and then being able to kind of see those goals as you go along, um, and then following that structure towards those smaller goals within the curriculum was really helpful.
Let me ask you this. One thing that I know we've talked about, me and Dylan, in a previous podcast about boot camps in particular, is financing and how that works. And we've talked about income sharing agreements. You may
Mm-hmm.
be familiar with that, where you kind of defer payment of your tuition until after you graduate, and it's taken out of your first year or two of actual working. Did you look at any of those? Was that interesting to you, or did you think, well, I'm just going to make this upfront front payment, or how did you think about the financing?
Yeah, so for the financing, I I wanted to be able to pay as much as possible upfront and not have to worry about it. That's just the way I like to do things. And I did look at those options where you don't pay, but then you pay part of your salary, and in a way that was kind of like signing some kind of contract or like being binded to that first job. And from past experience, I've gotten jobs where it wasn't as great as they sell it to you, or different things happen where you may have to leave that job for whatever reason, or you may get fired like I experienced. And so having that option of like, okay, I won't pay now, but I'm paying later, was in a way a contract that I didn't want to be signing, that I didn't want to commit to.
Yeah, I totally agree. I understand. It's not for everyone. I think, Dylan has a little more experience with this. He's known a few people who have done it. But it's definitely not for everyone. And if you can afford to pay for it up front, or as much as you can up front, then why not? Because you actually probably save money in the long run for sure.
Right.
So that sounds like that was important.
Right. And of course, that being said, like I realize how lucky I am in being able to move back in with my parents and having had enough in my savings to do the boot camp. But I always, suggest to people, if it's something that they're looking into and they still have a job currently, to stick with that job as long as they can save up enough money to make this, big career change. Because it does take a financial toll, besides just the boot camp. It may take a couple months to find your first job, you may need some new tools, whatever it may be. That there's definitely, like, if you can save before making the switch, that's something I always recommend.
Yeah, I think there's it's a mentality thing as well. So like I'm very anti-debt, and like the income sharing agreement is essentially that. It's a furloughed amount of debt that's going to be greater than the amount. So it's depending on your personality type, it's gonna definitely eat at you a little bit. I know it would for me, but that's nice. Now, when you were in the program, and various people did this, I wonder, based off this specifically ones, I imagine you got quite close to some of your I guess, what do you call them? Not colleagues. I'm forgetting.
Students, alumni.
Yeah,
What am I trying?
Co-students. That did you find that the dropout rate was significant? Did you find that depending on whether someone paid up front or in fact did the ISA, if they had a likely like a more likely, like, what were some of the things that when it came to the people, because they ain't good or bad, there are gonna be people who start that don't finish.
Right.
Anything that stood out to you?
So I think Thinkful is a little bit different in that everything's completely online. The curriculum was meant to be online, and they provide a lot of resources because it's online to make up for that, like not being in a classroom. And so it's hard to tell. It's hard to visually, see people dropping out, and instead of sitting in a classroom and then all of a sudden Joe's not there. You see somebody that started the curriculum around the same time as you, and all of a sudden they're not popping up in the Q&As anymore. So that was kind of very hard to track being online. However, the people that did drop out, I did notice kind of happened at the very start. And a lot of it had to do with, I think, jumping into it without really planning as much as they could have. So saying that they didn't have enough time to commit to the boot camp, or they had no idea what developing actually was, or they had never looked at a HTML before. So I think a lot of the dropouts had to do with just kind of bad planning, unfortunately, because I think if you do take at least a month or a couple weeks to at least get an idea of what you're going to get yourself into and really see if you're going to like it or not, that dropout wouldn't be so high.
Yeah, I've always found it a little bit interesting how you can scream at the top of the roof, "Hey, prepare before you go into your boot camp," so that you have some idea.
Yeah.
And sometimes people just don't. And that's the same thing for college CS programs also.
Right.
I was doing a video a while back on YouTube about programs, about coding boot camps, and one guy said in it's like, when I was going through it, I didn't really think I'd be sitting down and looking at computer screen all my life. It's like, yo, dog, come on, man.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's funny. We just interviewed Tech with Tim recently, and he said the same thing. with his first few classes, he noticed a lot of people jumping into the CS program. He's a college student, and a lot of them were not prepared. They'd never written code. They weren't very good at it, and it was like a 50% dropout rate, I think, within the first 3 years in the CS program.
And I think the difference is, in college you see, because I did go to college, and totally different than boot camp, obviously. And you do see people changing majors and not really knowing what they're doing, or like sticking to a major because it's what their parents did, or it's the thing to do. But it's a lot harder to just drop out of college. Like it feels like a way bigger decision um, than dropping out of a boot camp that's only six months or 4 months, whatever it may be. And I don't know. It's interesting because I feel like in college, when you're going in, a lot of kids are just kids. They actually don't know what they want. They haven't spent more than a month trying to figure out what they're going to study, what they want to do long term. And so I feel like that's definitely something that might be changing in the future because of these boot camps popping up, or because of these different like ways of learning and getting jobs. Nowadays, I think either they're going to have to emphasize to current high school students, saying like, look, you go to college to get a job for the future that you want, versus like you get to college to get a degree because you need it. I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does to me. I don't understand why anyone goes to college to get a degree in something they could have a hobby in that's not going to get them a job. I I don't know. I look at college as a very much so, how I would like college to be is very much so like a trade school, except for degrees. And so like a lot of people get the classic underwater basket weaving. Like
or
there's a lot
German.
of yeah. Well, I mean, I wasn't gonna say it,
I know
but
it.
you know, but unfortunately, it's strange because you essentially what ends up happening is you give unlimited loans to people who are 18, who in most circumstances have the skills and ability to make minimum wage. So all of a sudden, you give someone, $30,000 a loan that would take them 3 or 4 years in their current salary to pay off,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, "Sure, I love music. I'm gonna go study music. Do you want to be, a musician?" Yeah. Well, what? I mean, you could do that without 4 years and $50,000. I don't know. I digress.
Yeah, I kind of have the same mentality now, going through it and going through the boot camp. Just because, like, I think that same mentality of preparing for the boot camp, like you were talking about, and making sure it's something that you actually want, that same kind of preparation should be taken into account when you're going into college, when it's something that's way more expensive and a lot longer of a commitment. But back to the boot camp, I think just taking the time to prepare, and it's made me a lot more like financially maybe not knowledgeable, but financially aware, because it does, if you're deciding to do a boot camp, you want to know where your finances stand. You want to know what kind of job you want when you're out. You want to know, it kind of gets you thinking into that like long-term planning, and you can't do that long-term planning without taking all of these little things into account.
So I know mentoring is a very big aspect of the Thinkful Bootcamp. What was that like? That sort of the collaboration between yourself and the mentors.
It was excellent. And I think, like I said before, because they were online, they try to make up for that, like not being in a classroom, by giving you a mentor. And they provide mentors as well as Q&A sessions basically around the clock. And that's, you go into a live chat essentially and ask whatever questions you want. First come, first serve, and there's different ones throughout the day. And so if you're stuck on a problem, instead of having to wait till the end of class, or, let's say it's the end of class and there's like 7 students who have a question for the teacher, you have your dedicated time with your mentor, as well as those Q&A sessions to go to. And so for me, it was really great because it was your one-on-one time to ask all of the questions that you had. It was your accountability partner. It was somebody keeping you in check, and it was somebody who was motivating you, giving you ideas, giving you insight into what it's really like, you know, in the real world. Because all of these mentors are developers in real life as well. They're not just mentors, and they've had years of experience, which is something that I really liked about Thinkful, because they don't have teachers. So the curriculum is all reading based and practice based. And so instead of teachers, they have mentors who just help you through those projects, because it's really like, do it on your own. We're just here to help you out, which I think is great, because that's how it is in the real world, you know? And something that I see in a lot of other
Is it
boot
more
camps.
like? Oh, sorry to interrupt you. I was going to say, is it more like your pair programming?
You could say that it's a little bit more pair programming, except for the mentors are very hands off, in the sense that they don't code with you. They help you when you're stuck. They help you kind of guide you in the right direction, and they help you figure it out on your own, which can be very frustrating when you're learning to code. But at the same time, it's that kind of push that's going to make you a better developer in the long run.
Very cool. Yeah, it sounds like it's a really important part and piece of the curriculum. Now, what kind of do they give you, like career advice as well? I mean, is it everything?
Yeah, so that's, I mean, that's honestly, I talk so highly of Thinkful. And that being said, I struggled through Thinkful. Like, it took me a month longer to graduate, um, than, you know, the planned part. And I had to pay that extra month, which hurt. But, um, but it wasn't because of Thinkful. So they provide mentors, Q&A sessions, career coaching afterwards, which is 6 months of, again, dedicated time with somebody once or twice a week, making sure that you're applying to jobs, sending you potential, you know, job applications, helping you with your LinkedIn, your resume. They provide extra curriculum if you're struggling with, like, let's say, you know, I'm struggling with Node. They'll provide extra curriculum, and maybe even set you up with an hour with a mentor, for a technical interview coming up. So it really is all encompassing, with the resources that they give you. And something that I always say with Thinkful is that if you're really struggling, a lot of time, or if you don't get that job, or if you feel like they're not giving you enough, a lot of time I feel like it's unfortunately due to the student. Like, the student's not putting in the time, the student's not giving it a good effort. So
That's
yeah.
interesting, because I always think, like, when a student is struggling or not doing as much as they should be doing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm always thinking, like, is it the student's fault because they're not putting the hours in, or is it the curriculum's fault for not teaching the whatever they're teaching well enough? So I'm always like, who is the onus on? Is it because the student isn't putting the effort in, or is it because the curriculum isn't very good? Obviously, in this case, we know that's not true with Thinkific.
Mm-hmm.
They seem like they're Thinkful, excuse me, that they're pretty good. But do you think putting more hours in? I mean, is that the key to be successful in the program, or one of the keys?
I think that's an interesting point. I think that you definitely want to have a good curriculum as a base. You want to make sure that you understand what it is that you're trying to learn, and that you're given all of, like, the proper resources. But once you're given that, I think it really is up to the students to put in the hours. And if you're stuck on something, to really try to figure out why it is you're stuck, or what it is that you're not understanding, and find extra resources. Like, there's so much on, you know, YouTube, Free Code Camp, Codecademy, like all of these resources out there. Or even finding developers who are currently working as developers, you know, just reaching out on LinkedIn to people who could help you out. And sometimes it's just a matter of hearing it in a different way, or learning it from a different source, that's really going to make that light bulb turn on for the student. So again, I think it's obviously you want a good base curriculum, but from there, I think it's up to the student to put in the work. And a lot of it is knowing how you learn, and consuming, you know, all of this new things in the best way that you can.
Now, as you mentioned, you struggled a little bit with the program. Do you think good or bad time management had anything to do with it. I think a lot of times, as you sort of alluded to, that people don't really realize the amount of effort and time needed to sort of go and become a developer. Was there anything that maybe you started out and you changed that helped you sort of ramp up and succeed?
Oh, absolutely. It was my time management. So like I said, one of the reasons I chose Thinkful is because it was online, and one of the deals was I do this online while visiting my grandparents in Guatemala, because all they needed was just somebody there to accompany them. And so I actually did the first 3 months of my boot camp at my grandparents' house, and that was amazing. I mean, I would wake up early, they would wake up late. So I would wake up early, have like my 4 hours in the morning. And essentially, I would just have my 3 meals with them and then spend the rest of the time on the computer doing the boot camp. And then when I moved back home, it was around Christmas time. We had other family visiting in town, and then my sister got married, and then it was back and forth from Guatemala from there. So it was that change of routine from going from like dedicated hours a day learning to code. I was ahead of the game. And then having all of that shift to where every day was different. I didn't have committed hours to code. That totally threw me off track. And then once I started getting behind, it was playing catch up ever since. And when you're learning something new like programming and trying to play catch up at the same time, it definitely got to a point where it was extremely overwhelming. And so I definitely blame my poor time management in the course, which is why I say, like, I don't blame Thinkful at all for having that extra month. It was just a matter of me managing my time poorly.
So you really need to put in those 3 to 4 hours, 5 hours a day to be successful in the program, because it is a full-time program, right?
It is. Well, the one I did was a part-time program, and they suggest 2 to 3 hours, but I always say 3 to 4 at least, just because it takes maybe 2 to 3 to get through the curriculum, to reach your goals in a timely manner. But then you're going to want to spend an extra hour or two really understanding what you're learning, to be able to build the different apps and things, that all the different projects along the way.
Is there anything? So I always like to give, like, it's almost like 2 truths and a lie when it comes to programs. So what would be probably the best thing you'd say about Thinkful? What would be the worst thing you would say about the program, or maybe some constructive criticism would be a better way of going about it?
Sure. So I definitely think that one of the best things that Thinkful does is providing all of the resources that you could possibly need. Like I said, you have one-on-one mentorship, the Q&A sessions, you have curriculum, you have extra curriculum if you need it. They have workshops, the career coaching afterward. The resources are there, and I think Thinkful has done that so incredibly well. And I think in part they probably did that because it was online to make up for that, like not having a classroom. But it ends up being, in my opinion, better than sitting in a classroom and sharing one teacher with 15 other students. And then the one thing that I would say could be better about Thinkful, I would have to say pairing the student to a mentor. So I was somebody who went through 3 different mentors, and I know a lot of students through Thinkful had one mentor through their whole program. And part of it was my learning style and working with somebody else, which it's hard because you want to work well with everybody, right? In the real world, you're going to have to work with people that maybe you don't get along with so well. But when you're learning to code and you know your learning style, then you can better advocate for a mentor who helps you learn the best way that you possibly could. So I think maybe taking a little bit more time and truly pairing the student to the mentor a little bit better would be my one, not even complaint, just suggestion.
I like that. Let me finish this off. We'll finish the interview here in a bit. I just want to say, how did you transition from Thinkful to your freelancing job? Did you try to apply for other jobs, or why did you decide, and how did that freelance job come up?
So when I was applying to jobs about a year ago, I got really lucky, and this guy that I used to work with contacted me when he found out that I had gotten through the boot camp, and he basically took me on. So he started his own consulting services for development for like a very niche software. And so all this time I've been basically learning again, learning for this niche. It's still development, it's still programming, but it's very specific to this software. It's called NetSuite, kind of like a Salesforce type thing. And that happened right along the same time that my grandma passed away and I had to go to Guatemala. So again, everything got put on hold. And he was like, you know what? Go, you can still work remotely. That's totally fine. He doesn't even have an office yet. So it just kind of worked for both of us, being able to put in as many hours as I could. And while still, being with my family during that time. And then ever since, I've just been learning a lot and being put on more and more tasks with him. And so I know eventually he wants to have me on full time as soon as he can. And in the meantime, it's worked out for me. And I've gotten a lot of other freelancing, just little jobs like building websites here and there. So my route is definitely different.
No, that's great. That's great. I'm sorry to hear about your grandmother.
Thank you.
That's not good. But well, I thank you for telling us your story and where you are right now. I mean, what is your goal in the next year or two? I mean, what do you want to try to do? I know you're starting a podcast now. You have a YouTube channel. Like, how does that play into your
I do. Plan? So my goal is definitely to, first of all, move out of my parents' house. And I think I would like something a little bit more stable while still working with, the guy that I've been working with for a while, just because that's something that I can see myself doing long-term with him, whether that's part-time or full-time. But until he gets to that point and being able to hire me full-time, I do want to find something a little bit more stable. And like I mentioned before, finding something where I can learn maybe in person a few more things that I feel like I can still grow on, and then eventually being able to branch off and just do something remote from there. And always, of course, continue my podcast and YouTube and hopefully help other people. That's the goal. Help other people in places where I know I struggled with and wish I had somebody to help out with.
So if someone's listening right now that is looking, basically they're you from a year ago before, right. What advice would you give them?
Better time management. And that's something I still struggle with, but it's something that's so crucial. And I think if you dedicate the time to really sit down and get into the flow of learning to code, whether it's learning to code or getting into the flow of fixing your resume, reaching out to people, whatever stage you're at, just setting that dedicated time. And because at the end of the day, if you're committing time to this, you're committing time to yourself and your end goals. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. Dylan, do you have any other questions?
No, I was over here creeping on your website and and YouTube channel. Definitely check that out, guys. Some good stuff there.
Yeah, how can people reach you if they want to contact you? And
sure. Hi? So across basically all social media platforms, you can find me at Suitcase Coder, except for Twitter. I messed up and it's Coder Suitcase, but Suitcase Coder should pop me up on YouTube, Instagram.
Awesome. We'll make sure it's in the show notes.
Awesome. And thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you want to find more about what I'm up to, go to dylanisrael.com.
And if you want to know what I'm up to, you can check out my website at eric.video. If you haven't already, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And if you do, you might even be featured on our next episode. Don't forget to check out the website at selftaughtornot.com. From there, you can sign up for a mailing list where we give away free courses and a bunch of cool stuff. And we'll also let you know when the next episode comes out. And finally, if you didn't know, we have a Facebook group. It's called Code, Tech, and Caffeine. We have over 10,000 members, and you can find the link at selftaughtornot.com. So come join us. We have tons of developers willing to help you guys, mentor you guys. Check it out. Just make sure you go to selftaughtornot.com and check out the Code, Tech, and Caffeine link. Thanks, and take care.